I think I did the math once. About 20 sellers start every single day that are going to achieve $1 million in sales. And
imagine a blueprint, a step-by-step guide, a case study where we peel back the curtains and show you what it takes to sell on Amazon. Welcome to the $1 Million Case Study. Eat That Frog is another concept and book that I'd recommend to any entrepreneur. It states that if the worst thing you had to do all day was eat a frog and you got that out of the way first thing, then everything else after that will be much easier throughout your day. In other words, get your most important tasks done first. There's not enough hours in the day to achieve everything you want to, but you can always achieve the most important things. Think of the task that's going to bring the most value to you and your business. Or maybe it's the task that has the most significant consequences if you don't get it done. Use this approach when planning out each day to prioritize your top tasks. Remember, eat that frog. So at this stage, you've got your product being manufactured. Congratulations. Now you have to figure out how it's going to get from your supplier all the way to Amazon's fulfillment centers. And that's the topic of today's episode. But there's one other step I want to talk to you about before we dive into the shipping, and that is getting a product inspection done.
Do you think, for someone looking to start selling on Amazon, do you think Amazon is saturated?
You could probably answer that with this simple fact of like how many successful sellers there are on Amazon, and the idea that every single day about, I think I did the math once, about 20 sellers start every single day that are going to achieve $1 million in sales. And so that alone says like, yeah, people are still succeeding, like, and they're always going to. There will be successful people. I mean, it's up to you if you're going to be one of those. There are some subcategories that will actually never get saturated. I mean, a lot of home goods, you know, the color or the design, there's always something that can be done a little bit differently.
Nothing is ever saturated, right? I mean, if you can put out a product that has a good value proposition, you can make things work. There's always something that you can find and sell, no matter what.
Like we were talking earlier about mindset, I think often the people that, you know, are in groups and so on are going on about like, oh, Amazon's too saturated. I feel like they're often the types of people that wouldn't kind of commit because they're, I don't know, maybe just looking for excuses not to do it versus being willing to take a risk and put in the work.
I mean, the risk is not high. I mean, if you compare, so before we started this e-commerce business, we wanted to start a brick and mortar business. We wanted to open a Kumons, we wanted to open this like food prep place, and I think the bill was like $500,000 just to kind of start. So we'd have to get a loan, that sort of thing. You know, with Amazon, realistically, you can get started for $2,000 or $3,000 for a single product, I would say. And it's just very little risk. Once you get that first sale, then you'll have a lot more confidence. I mean, I've had students in my class start with much less on Amazon. The process is slower, of course, but you just kind of gradually build your way up. Once you get that first product in, you understand the process, the rest just comes a lot easier.
It's important that we're selling high quality products, but of course that can be really hard to monitor when your product's being manufactured in another country, such as China. This is where a third-party inspection service comes into play and is something that you would do before your product gets shipped out of China or wherever it's being manufactured. An inspection company is essentially a business that complies with international regulations and safety standards. Hiring an inspection company helps catch any issues before they leave the factory and make sure that only quality units are reaching your customers. First, let's talk about what we can do without an inspection company. What I'd recommend you do is ask your supplier to take photos of the production process. This allows you to keep an eye on the production and doesn't cost you anything. You want to make sure that your products reflect the samples that you initially received. So that's one thing that you can do that's really simple. Consider that a poor man's check. Now you might be asking, should I get an inspection or not? Because of course, this is an added expense on top of all your other costs. Typically, they're around $300, give or take. One consideration is to think about the value of your order. For instance, if you're paying $500 for your order, then the cost of an inspection is, almost doubling that amount. However, if you're spending $3,000 or $4,000, then that cost is relatively low once you average it out per unit. You've also got to assess the risk or the potential risk. There are some cases, unfortunately, where the samples from your supplier don't match the main order, where the supplier has maybe used cheaper, low quality materials instead of the more expensive ones that they sent to you as a sample. Now, this doesn't happen all the time, but it is good to be aware that it can happen. If you live in the US, you can certainly ship the product from China to your house first and inspect the goods there and then send them onto Amazon. That's another way to avoid paying for an inspection. But of course, while this does give you some peace of mind, if there are any problems with your products, there's not a lot that you can do now that they've left China and are in the US. The last thing you want is to have to remove defective products from Amazon's warehouse, which can be done, but honestly is a really big headache and it costs you money and time, and you may even have to deal with negative reviews and returns and that sort of thing. So we want to avoid all that. But with all that being said, there are plenty of cases where people don't use inspection services and their products are totally fine. I don't want to scare you. These are just some of the potential risks involved. So for the most peace of mind and the lowest risk, I'd recommend that you do get an inspection. It doesn't need to be every single time. You could get it for your first shipment only, or maybe every second or third, because even this will at least give your supplier some accountability that their product is getting checked from time to time. But if you can just build it into your product cost overall and do it every single shipment, then that gives you the absolute lowest risk in the long term. Where do you go to find an inspection company? Well, at Jungle Scout and myself personally, we've used Kima and had a great experience with them in the past. Other companies that are often talked about include VTrust and Topwin. Now let's go through how they work. First, you have to book the inspection at least 3 days in advance. Once you've booked, your supplier will be notified and an inspector will be assigned to visit their factory. The inspection usually includes a factory visit. They check the unit count, a workmanship check, for example, checking the appearance, color, style, making sure that these match what they're supposed to. They also perform on-site tests. So for example, checking the sturdiness of shipping cartons or doing stress and safety tests on products. They'll do a product and carton measurements check. They'll also check labels. So for example, the FNSKU barcodes and shipping labels, that kind of thing, plus any additional checks that you have requested. So keep in mind that they do have a number of checks that they go through by default, but they also encourage you to give them as much information as possible about your product so they know how to best check the quality. So how the process works is the inspector will take a portion of your products and check them against an internationally recognized standard called AQL. The AQL determines the sample size that gets inspected. Keep in mind, if you do want them to inspect a larger amount of your products, or even every single unit, they're definitely able to do that. It may just require you to book them for another day. It basically comes down to how many units that they can physically inspect in a day, but of course you can book them for additional days. From here, you'll receive an inspection report with images of the products and comments from the inspector, usually within 24 hours. Here's an example from the Jungle Slider from last season. It shows product specification checks, images of the product in and out of its packaging, packing labels, product drop tests, and even photos of your inspector and sometimes the factory and its manager. And most importantly, the report shows you the inspection result. Now, what happens if an inspection fails? So usually it's divided into major and minor defects. If it's a really bad fail with a lot of major defects, you should be able to get your money back provided that you've used Alipay, which is Alibaba's payment platform, where you're then protected by trade assurance. If not, and you directly wire transferred your deposit, then you can still try to leverage this report to get a refund, but in worst case scenario, you can back out at this point and not lose your entire investment. Remember that I encourage you to negotiate payment terms upfront, such as 30% upfront and then 70% before shipment. The other thing that you can do here is just ask them to rectify the issue and fix the problem units or shipment. On the other hand, if there are only minor problems that cause your inspection to fail, which was actually the case with our jungle sliders, then you can ask your supplier to fix these and rectify any issues before they reach Amazon's warehouse. In addition to this, you can use your inspection report as leverage to get a better deal than originally agreed upon. And then going forward, version 2.0 will be improved upon right out of the gate. So overall, I think you get a lot of great information, not to mention peace of mind from product inspections. So if you can work it into your budget, then I'd highly recommend you get one. At this point, after inspection, or not, you'll be ready to have your goods shipped out. How about $1 Million Case Study Season 4 with the jungle sliders? Knowing what you know now, is there anything that you'd go back and do differently this time?
I think a lot of the challenges that we encountered with the jungle slider was that it had too many moving parts. It can present a challenge. It can be that negative review that you get because a part broke off or something just isn't, working as it should. So I would say the biggest takeaway from the jungle slider is definitely stick to a product that with as few or as little moving parts. As far as also another thing, keep a longer time horizon in mind. I think that we think that we're going to launch, within a month, and that everything is going to be smooth sailing from there. I'd give it a little longer time horizon, especially if it's a product that you're going to modify and you're going to do some type of alteration. Yeah, that definitely it presented some challenges for us, and we had to alter it and modify it, and now of course it's performing well, but it's just the early stages weren't as smooth, and no pun intended, smooth sliding as we wanted it to.
Could you give me an update on where the jungle sliders are at the moment?
Yeah, so we actually have them now for sale on Amazon. We did do some I know, right? we did some alterations, as we talked about, to the slider rail because that was where we were getting some complaints and some negative reviews. So with the version 2.0, we went in and we literally redesigned the rail itself, which, like I said, that's this whole process is if you encounter a problem, definitely fix it. And since we sold out very quickly on the first version, we knew that we had a solid product, a great product, a product that for all intents and purposes people loved. But the feedback that we got was priceless, and that's what we've worked on fixing, and ultimately now we have it on Amazon, and we do have to revamp the listing because we need new images. Of course, this is now a slightly different design, so we want to make it sure that it's factual to what the current product is. But other than that, we're rocking and rolling again.
The first thing I'll mention is that while I'm gonna run you through all of the steps, I'd highly recommend hiring what's known as a freight forwarder. This is someone who arranges the entire shipment process and is very knowledgeable about everything from shipping terms to customs, packaging, labeling, and so on. They essentially become a trusted partner for your business, and in a lot of ways, the process would be almost impossible for the average person without them. The one time that I'd say you don't necessarily need one is when you're sending in a very small, low value shipment. But to help you decide whether you need one or not, here's a rough rule of thumb. If your shipment is over 200 kilograms, then that's when it's best to work with a freight forwarder. If your shipment is under 200 kilograms, then that's when it's probably better to get your supplier to organize the shipment for you. This is where they typically utilize DHL, UPS, FedEx, that sort of thing. The shipment is pretty small and doesn't need a whole lot of coordination. So if you do have a larger shipment, how do you go about finding a freight forwarder? Well, there are a number of places you can look, but I'd recommend Freightos.com. Here you can actually get quotes from multiple freight forwarders and see which quote looks best to you. Some things to look for in a good freight forwarder include the price, how well they communicate, whether they've worked with small sellers like yourself before, whether they've worked with importing your type of good before, and if they're knowledgeable on all of Amazon's requirements. So let's go through a quick demonstration of Freightos. First up, click up here to ship directly to Amazon FBA. The only reason I can think of not to is if you want to send it to your house first to inspect, which some people do. I prefer to send it straight into Amazon. If you've got a smaller shipment on pallets or crates, then you need to find out the dimensions and weight for each one, which your supplier should be able to tell you. For larger orders, you'll select containers. Let's pretend that we have a 20-foot full container. If you're unsure which option to select, there's a helpful article that you can click on here to give you a breakdown. An option that I like here is floor loaded, which means that your goods are never put on pallets, but instead the whole container is unloaded off the ship. It's put onto a truck and driven directly to Amazon. They open up the container at Amazon, take all your goods out, and then put them into their warehouse, which is generally the fastest and cheapest option. If you're doing a full container load, you're gonna tell them where it originates from. After doing that, you add the Amazon warehouse that it's gonna be sent to. I'll show you how to find that a little later in the episode. Next, I'd ask your supplier what port the goods will be sent from and enter that here. Then put in the date that the goods will be ready. Here, you'll put in the destination warehouse, which I'll also show you how to get in a little bit. Here, yes, I would recommend having them deal with the customs because it's not something that you want to deal with. Most of you will likely need to choose yes here for the customs bond. The bond essentially ensures that you pay for your customs fees or duties when they're due. All you really need to know is that you do need one. They are required. If you're gonna be doing multiple shipments per year, you can get unlimited customs bonds for $500, or you can select a single shipment. You just enter in your shipment value, what you paid for the shipment, and then it'll generate the price. Down here, tick any of these that are applicable. Then you can choose to add insurance here. You can put in the value of your shipment now and get to see the cost of the insurance before you actually have to purchase it. The really nice thing about Freightos is they're gonna go out and they're gonna go get a whole bunch of different quotes from a bunch of different freight forwarders. Now you can go through all the prices, see how long each of them take, and review each of these options to see which is the best one for you. After selecting one, it's going to ask you for some more details, description of your goods, and then you proceed to the payment, and that's about all there is to it. After you've made the payment, you're gonna give them the contact info of your factory, and then they'll basically connect with each other and coordinate from there. Just remember, if your goods are under 200 kilos, then don't worry about any of this. Just pay for an air courier through your factory. Over 200 kilos, this is the process you would use. Now let's go through step by step the entire shipping process. And remember that for everything I'm gonna mention, unless otherwise stated, your freight forwarder can handle this. I just want you to understand what's happening behind the scenes. So step number one, you need to get your goods from the factory to the international port that they'll be departing from. Here you essentially have two options. The first one, your factory can be responsible for getting the goods to the port. The shipping term for this is FOB, or free on board. This is the most common option. Alternatively, you or your freight forwarder can be responsible for getting the goods to the port. The shipping term for this is EXW, or Ex-Works. I'll come back to those in a little bit, so don't worry about what those mean right now. Step number two, your goods will then be transported to Amazon via air or sea. Some notes regarding these two options. When it comes to sea, this is the more typical option as it's much cheaper. It'll cost you roughly $1 per kilo though this number does vary because the cost has more to do with the volume or the space that it takes up rather than the weight. It usually takes 3 to 4 weeks for sea shipping, so it takes a little bit longer. That's the trade-off. Now, it's going to be shipped in a big shipping container. Your goods can either take up an entire container, known as full container load or FCL, or your goods will take up part of that container and share it with other people's goods. This is known as less than container load or LCL. These are your two sea shipping options. Outside of sea shipping, your other option is by air. This option is much more expensive. It'll cost you roughly $5 per kilo, but will usually only take about 5 to 10 days, so it's much quicker. If your shipment is very small and lightweight, then air shipping might be a good option for you. Additionally, if you're in a rush to get your product into Amazon, then this might also be the better option too. Step number 3, your goods will arrive at the domestic port of entry in the US. Now they're going to start the process of clearing customs. Here you'd want to allow approximately a week or so. This is where you'll want to enlist the help of a customs broker. And again, this is something that your freight forwarder can take care of for you. Either they'll act as your customs broker or hire someone for you. Depending on your product, there may be specific paperwork that you need. Again, your freight forwarder should be able to tell you this. Some documents that you probably will hear about include the bill of lading. This is just the master document for your shipping and proves that you own your shipment. There's your commercial invoice. That comes from your supplier and that outlines all of your goods. It also contains what's called an HS code, which is a code that determines the duties or the amount of duties that you pay. So what happens during this process? You'll pay duties if they're owed, and you'll also potentially have your goods inspected. One other thing that you'll need at this point is a customs bond. This ensures payment of duties and money owed to customs officials. You can purchase these on either a single shipment basis or annual, which will cover all shipments for that year. So you purchase that one depending on how many shipments you think you'll have for the year. Once your customs broker pays the duties, inspections are complete, and all paperwork has been confirmed to be in good order, then your goods will be released. On to step number 4. Your goods need to be prepped for Amazon, including being labeled and palletized. This typically takes place at a third-party logistics company, or 3PL for short. The only time you won't need any prep is if you have sent in a full container load that is floor loaded, which basically means that the container is full of your goods, but is not palletized. Usually it's best to find a freight forwarder that can also serve as your 3PL, just to streamline this process. Now with the goods prepped, they need to be sent into Amazon. And one of the first decisions that you'll need to make here is if you're doing shipping via SPD, or small parcel delivery, or a truckload, either full truckload or less than truckload. Here are some rules of thumb on when to pick what. Typically, shipments that weigh less than 150 pounds are cheaper sent in by SPD, and anything heavier than that, it's best to use LTL. A few things to note about SPD. There is a 200 case limit, and no one case can weigh more than 50 pounds. A few things to note about LTL. There are specifications for Amazon regarding weight, height, etc. of your pallets. So make sure that you're working with a 3PL that is aware of these. Now, in order for your goods to make it successfully into Amazon, they'll require a number of different labels. These should either already be on your product, or you'll print them from your Seller Central account and pass them along to your 3PL to affix. They are your FNSKU barcode. Like I spoke about last episode, if your products are exclusively for Amazon, then I'd recommend printing these directly onto the packaging so you don't have to worry about it at this step. Then you have your shipment ID labels. These are required for Amazon to identify your product. It enables Amazon to know what your product is and that you're the seller. If you're sending in boxes that are not palletized, which is known as small parcel delivery, each box will need to have a shipment ID. If you're sending in pallets, each pallet will need 4 of these on each side of the pallet. As already mentioned, your goods will often need to be palletized. This involves stacking multiple boxes of your goods, wrapping them in plastic, and then placing them on pallets. Once your goods are labeled and potentially palletized, they're ready to get taken into Amazon's warehouse. Again, you have options here. You can take advantage of Amazon's special rates with companies like UPS if you're sending via SPD, or you can utilize Amazon's partner services to arrange a truck to pick them up. You can either fill a truck, which again is full truckload, or part of a truck, less than truckload. So let me walk you through how to set up a shipment in Seller Central. This is a step that you'll have to do on your own, even if you've hired a freight forwarder to handle everything else. So to begin, let's go to Inventory, Manage Inventory. On the right-hand side, click the drop down for the product that you want to send in and click Send Replenish Inventory. You've now entered into the workflow for sending in a shipment. Start by selecting your ship from address. This would usually be either the address of the freight forwarder or 3PL that's holding your shipment. Next, you'll decide whether you're sending in individual or case-packed products. Individual means you have different SKUs or products inside of one box, whereas case-packed means you only have the one product inside this carton. Next, you'll need to tell Amazon how many units are in each case and how many cases you're sending in. Now you have to select who does the prep for your shipment. All Amazon cares about is whether it's Amazon or someone else. Your specific product may have specific prep requirements, so look through this list carefully. We recommend having the supplier or 3PL do the prep rather than Amazon, as Amazon will charge you more. You'll also tell Amazon whether you want them to apply the FNSKU barcodes or if you will. Again, you could have these already printed onto your packaging, which is what I'd recommend, or usually your supplier is happy to stick them on if you ask them. Amazon will charge you 20 cents per unit if they do it. Amazon will now tell you what fulfillment centers you'll be sending your goods to. It's common for this to be up to 3 different centers. For each fulfillment center, click on Work on Shipment to set up the details. There are a number of steps here. The first is to decide if you're shipping SPD or LTL. We've already discussed the differences here. For either SPD or LTL, you'll have to enter dimensions, weights, and quantities of your product. Once Amazon shows you the shipping charges, you'll click Accept and then have the ability to print out necessary shipping labels that you can send to your 3PL or freight forwarder. Finally, click Complete Shipment. All right, so I know shipping can be quite complex, so here's a few takeaways. Number 1, use a freight forwarder. I can't emphasize this enough. They're experts at this and they take care of and walk you through all of the steps I've just covered. If you hire a freight forwarder, you honestly won't have to learn or fully understand anyway a lot of the things that I've covered today. They just give you a good background as to what's happening. Next, aim for sea shipping whenever possible. You may choose air shipping to begin with to get your product into Amazon as quickly as possible, but then most people aim to get their shipments in by sea in the future in order to save on cost. Also remember that regardless of the shipping method you choose, it still does take time, so take this into consideration when making your plans. And finally, don't be stressed. I know this has sounded like a lot, but just take it one step at a time. You'll learn as you go. Now, remember, if you're following along and wanting to build your own Amazon business, then I'd recommend you join the $1 Million Case Study Challenge. The first steps are joining our private Facebook group. Each week, you'll receive action items so that you can follow along and be building your own business. The link is in the description. Also visit Jungle Scout if you'd like to see how our leading all-in-one platform can help you sell on Amazon. We have an array of tools from helping you find a product all the way to managing your business. For instance, try out Inventory Manager to help you make sure that you're always in stock once your shipment has arrived. If you'd like to see Jungle Scout in action, then check out the link in the description for a free live demo. In the next episode of the $1 Million Case Study, we're gonna set up Seller Central, get your listings created, and talk over the things that you can do whilst waiting for your product to arrive at Amazon. This is a fun step, so make sure to tune in for that one. I'll see you then. Version 2.0 will be improved right out the gate, right out of the gate. Okay, okay, cut that line. So let's go through a demonstration. But I don't have a demonstration.